Hi, I'm John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our Thought Leadership series at UC Davis's Graduate School of Management. Over the course of 10 different interviews, we're going to explore the ideas and the passions and the motivations of some of the faculty here at UC Davis. I think you're going to enjoy it. First up, we have David Woodruff, who's been with the school since 1990. After getting your PhD from Northwestern University, you are an expert in efficiency in a way. I mean, you optimize operations so that they can perform as best as they possibly can. But my big question for you at first is, why did you become an academic in the first place?
Well, I like learning. I guess that's the reason. And if you want to learn something, teach it. Actually, if you really want to learn something, write a book about it. But teaching works pretty well, and it's just my job is to learn. So I like having that as my job. When I was an undergraduate, and I think this remains true today, but when I was an undergraduate, the general academic enterprise was criticized as being something that produces future academics, and it did. I mean, I liked that environment. I liked learning. Although I did work at some real jobs for a number of years, then I missed the learning and went back and got a PhD.
And where did it come from, the learning, the thirst for learning? Was that when you were at Stanford doing your undergraduate degree?
I think that's when I found out that being an academic meant learning. But like most people, I probably was the most eager learner as a child. But then I found out that, if you're an academic, you can learn all the time, and you have a great environment for learning.
And then the obvious question is, why operations research in the field that you've devoted your life to?
Yeah, that's less obvious to me or anyone else. I mean, I guess like many people, I took a few classes and I said, I like this. I mean, it's sort of that simple. It was mathematical, but very practical mathematical. And also at the time I liked software, and it's an area where the mathematics and the software come together.
Right. What was some of your earliest research, and what did you discover from it?
Well, I discovered that I like research. I guess that, as a PhD student, I worked on topics that I don't work on now. As my thesis advisor developed a production control paradigm called CONWIP, and we worked on all aspects of how you would run a manufacturing facility using CONWIP, which I might just briefly pause to mention what that is. It's a production system where you keep a constant amount of work in the system, and so you don't overload the system with work, and you don't underload the system. You try to keep the right amount of work in the system, but that's not as easy. It sounds like a good idea. It's not so easy for people. I mean, you can imagine that if you're a production manager and you have things to make, you should start making them. Right. But really, you probably shouldn't. If there's already plenty of work in the system, you should wait until there's not plenty of work in the system and then start working on things. But that was the first project.
So it's about maximizing the capacity, really, right?
Well, that's you don't want to get technical, but that's not the right way to say it. So the capacity is a property of the production facility. Mm-hmm. So utilization of capacity would be something you might want to maximize. However, sorry, this is going to be a lecture. I don't think.
Oh, no, it's
put this
perfectly
on the cutting room
okay.
floor. But if you maximize the use of production, if you get it 100% full, you'll have queuing. The queues will be out the door. They'll grow without limit. And the queuing causes all kinds of trouble. The other thing is there'll be queuing inside the system. So there'll be piles of work in process all over the place, and it becomes very inflexible. Because if you say, we wish we weren't making that. Right. Well, too bad, it's half made, or half the components are made, the other half aren't made. So you actually don't want to use the capacity to 100%. Maybe 80, 85, 90% will actually make, if your goal is to make money, as opposed to keep the capacity 100% utilized, you probably shouldn't utilize it 100%. That's a very tough lesson for people to learn. And we weren't the first ones to discover that, but I think that we produced a system that shows that makes a lot of sense.
It's kind of like driving a car, right? I mean, if you accelerate too fast, you're wasting a lot of gas that you otherwise wouldn't waste, because you're not going to speed down the highway constantly, because that's inefficient. in terms of gasoline consumption.
Is it okay if I just totally disagree with you?
Yeah, of course it is.
No, sorry, not even close. No. What it is if you want to use a driving metaphor,
Yes.
is if you fill the road up with as many cars as it can handle,
Right.
then it'll cause a lot of troubles, cause accidents, cause
Sure.
confusion, cause troubles. In that case, it will actually slow the system down, and that's true in factories as well. If you get as much work in there as you can possibly put in there, it slows everything down. So although you're using the road 100%, right, in some sense, you've got as many cars on there as can be on there, it's hurting your throughput. And then if we drop the metaphor and switch back to a real factory, it particularly hurts your throughput of things you want to get through.
Yes.
So anyway, sorry to be pedantic.
No,
but
that's
you walked right into it.
And actually, I love your metaphor, adjusted from mine. Now, David, you've been involved in a Department of Energy project that involves sustainable energy. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I should preface it by saying that I work on general purpose methods, so algorithms, and then we always implement them as software, and we produce the software as open source software. So a lot of people use our methods for a lot of different problems. Now, having said that, we used our method, or at least set it up to use it, to look at how to optimize energy production. I hate to use the word schedules, but we'll call them schedules.
Okay.
In the presence of uncertainty due to renewables. So wind and solar were the main ones. There's also, we've worked on some hydro. It's a little bit less uncertain, but a little bit uncertain as well. So the problem that is faced in industry is that they allocate generators a day in advance. So they say which generators will be on and off each hour and a day in advance. And you don't really know how much wind you're going to get or how much solar power you're going to get a day in advance. So that adds a lot of uncertainty. And our method we worked on how to characterize the uncertainty and how to optimize the allocation of generators in the presence of that uncertainty.
Right. Give me a good example. What did you learn from it?
Well, all of the, yeah, I knew you were going to ask me questions like that. Everything we learned from it was technical and applies to every problem.
Yeah.
So what we learned that was important is you can take the uncertainty into account. That's what we learned. They have very severe limits on how fast they have to solve this. It has to be done in 5 minutes. When we can take the uncertainty into account and still solve it in 5 minutes, that's what we learned. I mean, I could bore you with all the little technical things, but they have nothing to do with wind or sun. They have to do with mathematics and computers and using many processors at once and all that. But the thing we learned that is accessible is you can do it. Or it can be done. Maybe you can't do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely can't do it.
I can't do it either. We don't have the data. But if you have the data, you can do it.
Right. And is that an aha kind of moment?
No, like most science. I mean, I don't know that anyone was shocked. I mean, there were people saying you can't do it, certainly. But I don't think they were shocked when we said, oh, yeah, you can do it. I mean, no.
Right.
We knew we could do it. I mean, or at least we thought we could.
Now, you have over 9,000 citations on Google Scholar. Where do most of them come from? What area of research, do you know?
I don't know. The most cited the most cited works are this work involving Conweb. That's an old paper, but it's the most cited paper in the International Journal of Production Research, and very heavily cited. So that's really my thesis advisor's brainchild. The idea of Conweb, although I claim important work on that paper. And then the next one is a paper describing software that allows for general purpose description of an optimization problem. So anybody who has an optimization problem needs to feed it to the computer somehow.
Right.
And this paper describes, it's a book that describes software that does that. And then, I have the statistics work I've done is pretty heavily cited. I work on general purpose methods. So you might use the word abstract, but really general purpose is a better word for optimizing in a sort of mathematical way. So when it's quantitative or numeric, problems when the input data are uncertain, which of course is most problems.
Right.
So let me just give a specific, I don't work on very many specific examples, and I don't work on this specific example, but here's the specific example. A specific example is you sell newspapers on a train platform, and you have to decide how many to buy before you go out there, of course. And if you buy too few, you'll run out of papers and you'll forego profit.
Right.
And maybe you'll even lose customers to somebody down the platform, market share, who knows. But the main thing is you also have to worry about buying too many, because then you'll have newspapers that are worth nothing, right?
Yeah, you're stuck
Can't
with inventory.
You can't sell them the next day. So this problem is a pretty well-known problem, and it kind of characterizes all the things I work on. So if you have this problem and you have general purpose software or methods, then you have to describe the problem, and you have to have a language to tell the computer about the problem. You also have to describe what you know about the data. And you might know yourself more about the data than you want to just let the computer discover on its own. For example, you may know in advance that the day of the week matters.
Sure.
So you want to be able to tell the computer that. You have data from the observations you've done in the past. You want to give that to the computer and characterize the uncertainty associated with your demand in this simple example. So there are other more complicated examples, like if you want to allocate thermal generators, gas and coal generators in advance, but you're uncertain about how much wind and solar power you might get tomorrow. To my eyes, that's a very similar problem. They may look very different. So there's a lot of problems that fit into this, and I work on general purpose methods that allow you to solve them.
Right. Makes sense.
Thanks.
I mean, it's all about efficiency, really, right?
You know, I try to avoid that word.
Why? Why? That's a good word.
It is a good word, but it implies things that don't strike at the core. And the core of what we're striking at is we want to do the best possible.
Right.
And the word efficiency can get people in trouble. So if you want to, efficiency, depending on how you measure it, might be how much throughput you get given your capacity.
Yes.
And if you try to maximize that, it may minimize your profits. You may do worse than you think. I mean, it's counterintuitive, but very important message is that if you load your systems up to the max, you may not make as much money as you would make if you kept them at the sweet spot, at the right amount of utilization, as opposed to 100% utilization.
Right. And this is a challenge, balancing demand and supply, essentially, right? That's always existed. I did a book on 10 Army Air Force officers in World War II, whose job it was to do logistics for the Army Air Force. And they basically had to calculate how many planes would we lose, how many pilots would we have to retrain to keep our Army Air Corps planes in the air bombing our enemy. And it's a similar kind of formula, right, that they have to approach to make sure they have maximum firepower in light of planes that get damaged, planes that go down, pilots that die, or get injured and can no longer fly them. And talk about uncertainty, that's pretty uncertain.
Right, there's a lot of uncertainty there.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, this aside, but people do use the methods we produce, always go into open source software. So that's the way to have true impact. So, you ask about citations, that's some form of impact, but I think a bigger form of impact is that people use your methods, use my methods, use one's methods. And so we try to put the software out there, and people use the software for all sorts of applications, including military applications. So I don't know anything about those, but they use them for energy applications, which are easy to describe, and for planning and all sorts of things.
And your career coincides with really the development and the accessibility of computing to everyone, which is kind of interesting in and of itself.
It is, and the other thing that's happened, and is still happening, is the availability of a lot of processors.
Right.
So your laptop probably has at least 4 and maybe 8 dual-threaded processors, and to have a 16-core or a 32-core desktop is nothing these days. I mean,
yes.
no one would think twice about that. And we do projects where we use thousands of cores, and that's been a big change. And to be able to use that compute power to get a solution quickly.
Right. Because when we grew up, computers were behind glass windows in air-conditioned rooms, and they were massive pieces of iron.
Right, waiting for your deck to be read was,
exactly.
was part of the process.
And I even imagine that while there had been a lot of development from that period to when you started using computers at Stanford and Northwestern, it's nothing like it was or is today.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've heard all the things about there's more firepower in your pocket than there was, and that has enabled a lot of people, including myself, to get your work out there, that anybody can use these fairly sophisticated algorithms. People have the computers to use them.
Now you're heading up a big conference that's coming here in July, I believe. It's the International Conference of Stochastic Programming. Tell me about that.
Yeah, okay, so this is was a triannual conference. Then the COVID happened and it got bumped around a little bit, but normally every 3 years. And this is a society of a sort of sub-society of the Mathematical Programming Society. And the word programming here, I should pause and say, the word programming here comes from the British word programming. British people will wake up in the morning and say, "What's the program for today, lovey?" And what they mean by that is, what are we going to do today?
Right.
So this word comes from that, not from writing software, and it comes from using computers to make plans. So, and of course, this conference relates to using computers to make plans or algorithms in the face of uncertain input data. And the conference has people who do mathematics, pure theory, people who do software and applications, and then people who do pure application, people in practice who do pure applications. And it's an important, not a huge conference. In fact, it's going to be here, there, and over there. It's going to be here in this part of the campus this summer. And I'm pretty excited about it. We have a lot of people from Amazon and people from the Navy and people from all the universities all over the world.
So practitioners and academics.
Yes, it's more heavily academic. They're line managers are not coming to this,
right?
But people from industry who have PhDs who work on new methods would be coming to this.
Is there an item on the agenda that most excites you?
Wow. This is my conference, right? It's a week-long conference. So to say there's one thing that most excites me, I don't know. And a lot of people are excited about, well, I got to be honest. I'm excited about my own work that's being presented. So that's what excites me the most. I was trying to duck that, trying not to say that. But
no, that's perfectly okay.
So what I'm working on is what's most exciting to me. But there are a lot of other things there that are interesting.
Okay, so David, you've been at this for more than a quarter of a century. Over that time span, what have you learned?
Well, all the research things I've learned are sort of, are narrow and technical, but the big picture thing I've learned comes back to that RPE project. That is, there's a lot of things you can do. And it amazes me when we go to a conference, practitioners will walk up and say, "Oh, we're using your software to do this or that." And we've never even talked to them. When I think back to as a graduate student, we would write software, and I think no one but me could use this software. And if you wanted to use it, we'd have to spend a couple days together, But now it's amazing. People I've never even met or seen or heard of walk up and say, "Oh, we're using your software to," they're using it to decide how to manage the solar power on their buildings, right? So if you have solar power on your buildings, sorry, this is an aside, but if you have solar power on your buildings, you have to decide whether to sell it to the grid or power your building and charge your batteries, discharge your battery, those reasonably complicated problem that you can't really do heuristically. You should use some software. So they use ours. Some people use ours. It's very gratifying. I know I took your "what did you discover" to what's most gratifying, but that is most gratifying.
That's perfectly good. David, it's been a real pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. We've been talking to David Woodruff at UC Davis's Graduate School of Management. This is part of our Thought Leadership series. Thanks for watching.